Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio today with me is a phenomenal woman who I've known for quite a long time, from childhood, literally. We've gone to elementary school together. We've literally lived blocks away from one another. I know the family well. And she has taken some time out of her busy schedule to be with us today. She's a mom, she's a wife, she's a woman of God, and she has a powerful story, a powerful journey that she'd like to share with us in hopes of inspiring and encouraging and uplifting. So I surely appreciate her taking the time out to do just that. So without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me the pleasure of introducing to you Miss Andrea Nelson. Andrea, thank you so much for being on the show today. I
Hey,
surely
good
appreciate it.
evening. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, before we get started, getting into the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of the show, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with our audience a little bit about yourself. You know, who you are, what you do, where you're from, anything that you'd like to share. Just kind of a general introduction to give them a little taste of who is Andrea.
Okay, so Andrea is a Beasley alumni, Academy of Our Lady alumni, and a Chicago State alumni. Actually, I was born and raised on the South Side. I have ventured outside the city and the country for a little bit, but Chicago is my home. Joseph was a blast when we were kids. Just just to let you guys know, I am married to my husband of almost 25 years, Andre Nelson Sr., and we have three lovely children and a daughter in law and two grandchildren. A recent college graduate, and God willing, another college graduate in May. We're gonna just keep her on the prayer list until
All right, that's
until we
good.
march across that stage with the diploma.
Mm-mm-mm.
I have had an interesting path. I'm also a Navy veteran. I'm a service disabled veteran. I was in the military during Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Mm.
So I lived overseas for a few years. And then I was moving around a little bit on the East Coast with the Navy before I got out. And I did a little work here and a little work there with a couple of corporations and got married. And my husband asked me to leave my job. Has been self employed probably since, what did he say, 84?
Hmm.
So I took that leap of faith and quit my job while I was, right after we got married. Found out I was pregnant, but we have only been doing our businesses ever since. So
Awesome.
for 25 years now.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I didn't even know all of that about you. I thought just when you think you know everything about somebody, I didn't I didn't even
You
know that.
didn't?
So cool. That's all right. So entrepreneur, Navy veteran, multiple businesses, of course. And like you said, just the idea of you being able to your husband saying, "Hey, let's take this leap of faith," and I'd like for you not to have to work and like I said, and of course you are working, but I mean doing your own thing business
Mhm.
wise. Anytime you pursue that type of entrepreneurial venture, it's never an easy thing. But I do believe in entrepreneurship from the standpoint that it's a God given vision. Anybody can run a business, but it takes something special for you to be an entrepreneur. And so to place that vision on your heart, on your husband's heart, and obviously you've been successful over the years to be able to raise your family and have great success. That's an awesome thing. So I appreciate you sharing
There
that.
was
And
definitely a leap of faith. We were newlyweds.
yeah,
And believe it or not, we got married in less than a year. So it was
okay.
a tremendous leap of faith. But since he had already been doing various endeavors over the
Hmm.
years, I just had the faith and I figured I had the discipline and some kind of know how because of, my previous experience, not only in military, but when I was in college, before I came back and finished at Chicago State, I was at St. Augustine's College,
Hmm.
which is a whole unique story in and of itself. But it was a couple who were alumni, and they opened a restaurant. It was a soul food restaurant. It was right at the across the street from the gate of the school. And they were a young couple, and I worked for them for quite some time, and I just learned so much from them. At the time, I didn't know how much I was learning from them,
Hmm.
but now I definitely know how much I learned from them as a husband and wife team working just for themselves. And they had two young children at the time. So shout out to Queen LeCount,
Awesome.
the LeCounts, Mr. and Mrs. LeCount. They
Okay.
had a restaurant. So it was a great experience.
That's good. And and I love hearing stories like that because, like you just said, I didn't realize what I was learning at the time. I didn't realize what all of this meant. And, you know, I'll be the first to say that wasn't by accident that you just happened to be, this young kid, working at a restaurant. Um, you didn't just work at a restaurant. You worked under a husband and wife entrepreneurial team, husband and wife who had a couple of kids. Seeing that whole dynamic, never
Right.
knowing at that time that, hey, fast forward a few years, I'm going to be a part of a husband wife dynamic,
Right.
running entrepreneurship, having an entrepreneurship venture, and I'm going to have a couple of kids that I'm going to have to raise along the way. These things are not by accident. That's why I said when the difference between being an entrepreneur versus being a business owner is entrepreneurship is I'm a firm believer that's a divine gift. That's a divine gift from God to position you to say what you're getting ready to do is something extra special. This is above just making a quick buck. You're going to change lives. You're going to make change in a meaningful way. You're going to impact people. And so I have to make sure that you get that introductory training, even if you don't understand or get why you're going through what you're going through at that moment. I'm setting the table for you to be ready. So when it, manifests itself and it starts to grow and become this big vision that you always hoped and the desired that it would be, you'll be ready for it. And as you said, you'll have the discipline to handle it. You'll know exactly what to do, how to navigate through that. All of those details matter. And that's all that was happening. God was setting you up to be ready to
He
do
did.
that. That's
And
why
they
when
did an excellent job. They
yeah.
were very faithful to our school. We had a small um, private black college, it's Episcopal College. They met there. They got married. They had the business right across the street. They hired the young people from the college. They
Mm-hmm.
donated back to the college. So all of those things, I even babysat their kids a couple of times. We really got kind of close. They really mentored
Mm-hmm.
me in a lot of ways. So it was very impactful.
That's
And I
great.
thank God that I met them.
Absolutely. That meeting was supposed to happen. They were supposed to be your spiritual mentors, if you will, in business and in life, and obviously set a good example for you. Just the fact that you said you've been married coming up on 25 years, that used to not be a unusual thing to say. But in these days and times, unfortunately, one little, mishap, one little, misstep or argument or disagreement, and people are ready to just throw in the towel and just let it all go. And again, you are defying what is the norms of today. You're defying that by showing the positive example that needs to be shown in order to and again, in hopes of inspiring others and showing them by example, what does this look like? What does successful, businesses with married couples working together, dealing not only with the dynamics of the business, but just dealing with the dynamics of raising the family and all of those elements that come along with that. So that's really awesome, Andrea, and I'm so glad that you just even in these first few minutes of our conversation are sharing this. It's so important. It's so it's so meaningful, and again, I truly do appreciate that. So I do want to kind of build on this a little bit more, if we could, by kind of taking us back a little bit further. And what I mean by that is, anytime we talk about, our journeys, our stories, you can't really get the full gist of it all without speaking to, what was it like in the beginning. So that's where I want to go with you. And so if you would just kind of think back to childhood. And as you reflect back to those childhood years, please share with us any fond memories that you have about childhood. What was it like growing up? And if there were any challenges along the way as you were coming up as a child. We both, of course, grew up south side of Chicago. Tell the audience, what was that like for you and your family? What was that experience like for you?
For the most part, it was a pretty good experience. I originally moved to when I started school. I went to a school that went K through 6,
Mm-hmm.
and it was right down the street from my house, so we could literally just walk. With Joseph J. Robichaud was the name of the school, and that was a pretty good experience. And at the time, I had two teachers that went to my church. It was a bigger church, but they went to our church. And then after the 6th grade, we had to go to Mahalia Jackson. I'm sure you heard of
Mm-hmm.
that school. And that's when, like, I kind of got bullied when I was little because I was small and I wore glasses. And, back in the day, glasses were not the fashion. And, it was dark. So it was just things that kids go through. So when I got to Mahalia Jackson, though, we were in 7th grade, and all those kids had gone to school together since kindergarten. But all my classmates were trying to blend in and fit in. And so that was kind of different for me because I was like, man, we used to be friends, and now they're like, oh, we're not talking to her, or, oh, you think you're so smart, or, just the bullying did get
Mm-hmm.
kind of hectic. But not long, let's say Beasley opened, and my mother heard about it, and I tested in, and then it was like a whole different experience. Then I wasn't like ostracized for reading my books and doing certain things that, of course, Beasley at the time was just really known for, high academic standards.
Mm-hmm.
So that changed a lot, probably, of how things actually went for me, because it was getting to the point where I was gonna have to fight somebody. It was starting to escalate.
Right, right.
And then then I went to Beasley, and so that was a non-issue because everybody was new. Because I was in the second graduating class, so I came in like half of the year, so I did all the rest of 7th grade and all 8th grade. So everybody was new, so it was no, the cliques and all those
Mm-hmm.
things that we do as people form. They hadn't formed, so that was probably a good change for me at the time.
That's good, and that's interesting that you point that out. I mean, I know everybody that has an opportunity to listen may not understand, not having been from Chicago, understand, what Beasley was like for us back then. Again, as we stated, we grew up south side of Chicago, so it was not unusual for many of us to go to, local area Chicago public schools. I was actually attending a Catholic school, that was affiliated with my church, right prior to going to Beasley. But, as you stated, the difference in growing up, particularly as a black kid, and being smart, that wasn't always considered to be cool. It
Right.
wasn't a cool. It wasn't the knowledge of it all wasn't appreciated. It wasn't respected. And even when you talked about like wearing glasses or having braces or anything like that, that wasn't cool. But then the transition into a school like Beasley, which was at that time was, a new phenomenon in terms of a public school. And I've
Right.
often shared with people how, positionally, we're talking about a school, of course, that was definitely in the hood, or at that time across the street from
Um, from
Robert
Robert Taylor
Taylor
Homes.
Homes, was one of the largest housing projects in the nation at that time. And not only that, but then you had a lot of kids who looked like you that were also smart going to that
Right.
school. And it was almost like it was, and it's funny to tell this story every time I giggle every time I tell it. It's like it was the reverse of what we typically experience. We usually get bused to go to a predominantly white school to get these
Right.
opportunities. And here we had a school where white kids were getting bused to come to our
Come to our
school
school, right?
because,
And there were a lot of them couldn't get in either.
and they
I
all
think
didn't
we
get
only had
in.
one white boy. I mean, excuse me, white young man who graduated with us.
Exactly. So that was the thing too. Like we were the dominant group in the school, and in terms of our ethnicity, and everybody was smart. Even if you didn't come from a financially strong household, because we had, of course, we had kids who lived in the neighboring project homes, but these kids were
They were
smart.
smart, right?
They were smart. So you can say what you want to about your house looking nicer than theirs or whatever, but you couldn't. They could hang with you or overtake you academically in the classroom. So, and then we had teachers that looked like us in
Right.
many of those classrooms as well. So that whole experience in itself was very powerful. So I totally get what you're saying about the game changing
It
effect of
was it
that,
was
and
definitely game
you
changing.
know, yeah, and so just it was a blessing, and we didn't realize it at the time. That this was an opportunity that we don't usually get, or it would have cost us a considerable amount of money,
Right.
on the part of our parents to have sent us to may have been traditionally a private school, but this was a public school offering this excellence in academics. So we were in a great position to pivot in a way that would set the stage for us for years to come. You
I
know,
definitely agree. I
so
definitely
yes.
agree. I think they really prepared me a lot. And like you said, the majority of our teachers were definitely of that same ethnicity as us, and the teachers that weren't were still very dedicated
Hmm.
to excellence. And I don't know if you remember Mr. Adamak. I still
I
remember
sure
Mr.
do. I
Adamak.
sure do.
And I'm if anybody knows Mr. Adamak, I still use his method even when I'm like getting prepared for my day of outlining what I'm going
I,
to do for the day, and when
hmm.
I'm talking, and I got that from Mr. Joseph
Yeah.
Adamak.
I still I'm actually still in touch with Mr. Adamak, and he and I are friends on social media, and he bought my book, and we've communicated from time to
But tell
time
him
over.
that he has another student that he
Yes.
definitely impacted. I like the fact
Hmm.
that he always made his class dress up on Fridays. The
Hmm.
guys had to wear ties and a shirt, and the young ladies had to wear a dress and a
Uh-huh.
blouse. And if
Yep.
you didn't have one, he had one for you.
I mean, anybody
Remember?
had a chance to experience him. I mean, like I said, and I've even shared with him. I mean, he was the one who inspired me to even have a thing for wanting to wear ties with shirts, and just how immaculate he used to dress, and like you
Yeah,
said, and
he did.
everything. And it wasn't just in his immaculate in his clothing, like you said, it was in the work. Like you couldn't just put together sloppy paper, your
Right.
homework or your assignments. You remember you had to draw lines and you had to write it a certain way, and everything was all organized and neat. Again, we didn't have an appreciation or truly understanding what that was like back then. But as you stated, all these years later, I still remember that type of stuff.
Me
And
too.
so again, shout out to Mr. Adamak. He's still alive and kicking, and
Well,
he's
tell him I
enjoying his
said hi
retirement
next time
years.
you reach out to him. Right.
Yeah.
He had a
So.
great impact. Beasley had a great impact. And then from there, for 1 year, I went to Indiana.
Hmm.
But I found that to be, and my mother didn't want me to go to Indiana. That was like the next step premier high school. You go
Hmm.
to the few magnet, Chicago had a little system. They were public schools, but you had a few public school grammar schools that were considered top notch. And then from there, you get graduated into the top notch high schools,
Hmm.
public high schools. But it was far, and it was a lot of children there. And most of my schooling, I went to small schools, and she just didn't think it would be a good fit. And so she turned out to be right, and that's why I ended up going to Academy of Our Lady.
Awesome, awesome, and And again, you just never know, because I was in the same boat where I was initially wanting to go to, schools like your Whitney Youngs or your Lynn Blooms or your Kenwoods, and
Yeah.
and at that time, my mom was shifting me to go to St. Ignatius, and I wasn't really trying to go to a Catholic school again and all of that, and you gonna take this test, and I go take the test, and I get in, and I'm like, oh,
Right.
don't get me wrong, academically solid school and all of that, but the challenge of it, of course, was the financial.
Right.
Was what ultimately was what took me out of that after 1 year, because my mom just couldn't afford it. I mean,
Yeah,
even
that's
back
very
then in the '80s, the tuition to go to St. Ignatius can mirror college tuition.
still
So
does.
yeah,
Still
and it
does.
was and it was far. I had to
Right.
catch 3 buses and a train to get to school each day, in the
Yeah.
morning. So that was a lot to do all of that. So it's interesting that you have similar experiences early on in schooling, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because again, I have my own little journeys with that as well, and just the cost factor and making sure it's the right fit for us. And unfortunately, money oftentimes plays a big role in whether or not it's a big fit for us, even for colleges.
It does.
Because some of us, I know I experienced it personally. You have this ideal school that you think you want to go to, but then what happens if I get accepted into that school, but then I can't afford to go to it? Even though I academically qualified, and then now am I now forced to just go to the school that's the highest bidder versus the school that I want to go to because I think it's a good fit for me?
That happened to
And
me.
it happened to me. Happened
That
to me.
happened to me, and I ended up leaving that school. But originally, I wanted to go to Spelman.
Hmm.
But by the time I got my letter from Spelman, they didn't have any more housing. And my mother did not
Mm,
want a freshman to have to get an apartment and have a car. And those type, which as a parent, I understand that because so you at least want your child to be on campus for a year or two, being away from home before getting into all of that other stuff, especially in Atlanta.
yeah. And this is so interesting that you say this, because that's funny that you said that, because, of course, my number one choice of school was Morehouse. And I got into Morehouse. But then when I got the letter, it wasn't so much the housing piece of it. It was, I got the letter, and I still, to this day, I still have the letter and the certificate and everything that they sent. I still have that. But I remember in that letter, like, a deposit was due like in 5 days to hold your spot, and it was like $2,500. And so, as happy as I was in the moment that I had gotten into my number one choice of school, I already knew. I said, my mom ain't got no $2,500 to
Right,
hold no
right,
spot. So I was like, guess I'm
right,
not going there, even though it was my top choice. Now, don't get me wrong, I would end up going to a good undergrad school, and I enjoyed the experience and all, but it wasn't my choice. And ultimately, that choice was driven, in big part, it was driven by the ability to
money,
pay,
finances.
the money part of it. And so, again, and it happens to us on the academic level. That happens to kids who, maybe they have athletic abilities, having to go to the places that are going to offer them the money in order to get
Right.
in, and not necessarily what may be ideally their best fit, if you will. Um, so it's just interesting. You're sharing your parts of it, and I'm like, yeah, me
Well,
too.
it was finance. I mean, because my mother's gonna pay a house note and pay a apartment rent,
Right.
and at the time Tracy had just. It's a whole funny story, but Tracy was at Longwood
Hmm.
at Longwood and Academy Our Lady is the same school. That was just the
Right.
nickname, and so she graduated from eighth grade when I graduated from high school.
Hmm.
So that was just another continuation of tuition,
Exactly.
and so I'm sure too. My mother was like, "Oh," and I went to University of Minnesota Morris for 1 year, and that was pretty much a disaster. And I came home and I was volunteering with this gentleman named W. Jackson, and he said it was he was a former English teacher, and he had like three pensions. He did teaching. He worked for the like Amtrak or the railroad and something else, and he helped kids get into HBCUs. And
Hmm.
he said it was his mission, his God given mission, to get black children out of Chicago and into a HBCU.
Wow. Okay.
And he actually, as you want to talk about some interesting educational challenges, I was just working with him, making calls to different schools, me and another young lady that I met. And we did that all summer. And it was time to go to school. And I didn't have a college still. And he said, you know what? I'm going to give you this letter of recommendation. And I'm sending some kids to, various schools in the South. And you come and meet. Do you remember when Trailways was right down the street from
Mm-hmm.
95th Street when Trailways was still in existence?
I do remember that. I do.
And my mother sent me with just a little bit of pocket change on the bus. I had a letter, a recommendation. I didn't have an admission. I had a letter. And I get on the bus and all these kids, they're going, Fizz, Tuskegee, just different HBCUs. And this one girl was crying. She was from Chicago the whole time. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then, I was everybody was trying to talk to her and console her. And I was like, what school are you going to? And she said, I'm going to St. Augustine's College. Because it was a college at the time. Now it's a university.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm going there too. And so she was kind of like sitting with these other young guys. But when we got to, I think it was Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
we all had to get off the bus. And then their buses took them to their respective states, Alabama or South Carolina. And we had to wait and get on another bus. So eventually we all got on another bus. She cried the whole way, literally from Chicago to North Carolina.
Wow.
She had never left Chicago, ever.
Mm.
We get to Raleigh, North Carolina at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And so in the 80s, everything is in the South, the Bible Belt, especially, prior to now, a lot of stuff wasn't open.
Mm-hmm.
So we walk out and it was an older taxi cab driver. And he said, where do you guys need to go? And I said, oh, we need to go to St. Augustine's College, but it's so late, we don't know what to do. And he said, get in, I'm going to take you, and I know what to do. So he gets us on. It's a really tiny school. So the people at the little security gate let us in, and it's a circle, and he takes us around to the dorm. And he said, I'm going to see if Miss, what's her name? Lattimore, I think was her name, is in the dorm. She's a dorm mother. And I'm going to tell her you guys are here. And he said, I'm away. I won't leave until we make sure that Miss Lattimore will let you in. And he rang, and then she finally came down, the dorm mother. So you already know HBCUs. There wasn't no co-ed dorms, co-ed floors, not then. And
Right.
every dorm had a dorm mother or a dorm father. And she opened the door. He told them, like, oh, we have these girls, and they say they come in to register, but they don't have any, place to stay. Registration hadn't even opened yet.
Wow.
We got there a couple of days before the freshman orientation. So she said, okay, I'll take them. I'm going to put them in a room, and then I'll let them know what to do. And we got in, and we were roommates for a little while. But because I did have some college credits, I got to stay in that dorm at the time. That was a senior upperclassman dorm.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to move, but she got to stay there maybe about 3 weeks. But I took my letter to the admissions office the next day. I talked to the dean, and then he said, okay, well, now we're going to start financial aid and registration in a couple of days. And we got a couple of freshman activities or new student activities. And we just went to the activities like we had got a letter in the fall. And the rest is kind of like history. We got registered. It was a process, with the financial
Mm-hmm.
aid and things. At the time, the school wasn't quite as organized as the big schools, but it all worked out. And after like maybe my freshman year, then I got the job at LeCounts. So towards the end of my freshman year, that's when I met the LeCounts. And
Mm-hmm.
so the HBCUs have a special place in my heart, because where else can you go at 10 o'clock at night in the dorm person lets you in and give a roof over your head.
Right,
And they
right.
made sure we ate.
That's awesome. That is an awesome story, awesome testimony. And again, I know it may have seemed crazy and hectic at the time, but I can't help but to go back to just say, how God lined that up. I mean,
I
here you are,
know.
you're working this little job, at the place where this guy is helping kids get into school, and then he says, "Hey, I got a place for you. Here's a letter. Take this
My
letter with you,
people don't even
and get
believe
on this
me.
bus." you know,
People, right? People don't
what?
even believe my mother when they were like, "You just sent your daughter with on a one-way ticket and the letter,"
And a letter and a little
and she
change
said,
in
"I
your
put it in
pocket.
God's hands."
So that's there we go. There we go. So, I mean, just you can't, like I say, you can't make this up. And
You can't make it up.
that's why people were, even probably even to today, you share this story, people are like, what? No, you got to be kidding. No, this is what it looks like when you have God's favoring over you, over your life, over your family. This is the kind of stuff. It may seem crazy to the world, but after a while, when you have that relationship with God and you see how He moves, it's not even crazy anymore. It's just like I almost expect it to,
Well,
because it's
then when you
just
reach other challenges, they don't seem as daunting.
hmm
I mean, if you
absolutely.
can go to college with a one-way
With,
ticket and probably, I don't know if I had $100 or $125 in my pocket. I don't
hmm
even know. And graduate from college, then that's something.
yeah, I
Then,
mean,
after that, I got my work study job in the library. I worked at the restaurant, and then the 2 years, like 2 years in, and I was able to become. They had like rented out some off-campus apartments, like literally across the street. So I became like a RA. I would give out,
hmm
me and another young lady were roommates, and we would give out the supplies and stuff. So then I didn't have to pay for the room and board. My mom didn't have to pay for the room and board anymore. So it could be done. You just have to be creative and determined, and you do have to. Um, what do I want to say? You have to be not a pleasant individual, but you have to be someone that people perceive you want to do something or succeed.
hmm
But it was a blessing going to that university. It was small, so I was a math major at the time. So other than the general ed classes, I only had the same few teachers every day. And one day I called myself going like, "Oh, I'm just going to sleep in today. I'm not going to class. I go tomorrow. Why did my professor come to the dorm?" And she was talking to the dorm mothers. They called me down. She was like, "I know I saw you yesterday, but you didn't come today.
wow.
Where can you go to school where the professors like know you and come like, look,
And and
I'm
that's
with
what, when we talk about, again, I wanted to go to an HBCU, but that was one of the things that was the draw for
you." Right.
HBCU was just the fact that, you have that family like experience. It's kind of like how we grew up. You grew up in your neighborhood. If you were acting up, back in the day, there would be a neighboring parent or whatever that you might get dealt with, and then
Right.
when your actual parent comes home, you won't get dealt with. It was a community type of thing, and that's what that HBCU environment offers, and that was one of the things that was attractive to me in wanting to go to one. Again, no, I mean, I ended up going to school in Wisconsin, UW Eau Claire, and it was a great experience, and I grew in many ways. That I would never trade or take back. But the one thing that was missing, and even to this very day, that I know is missing from that, is that having that community of somebody that looks like you, that would make those extra leaps and bounds for you, that you just can't. It's not a part of the official procedures and rules. This is just
Right.
an individual that's caring about you and concerned about your well-being. And again, they kind of serve as sort of that surrogate parent, if you will. There was a gentleman like that in my school. He was overseeing our multicultural office. His name was Jim Vance, rest in peace. But he was like a dad for many of us, and
Right.
he looked out for us, and
Because you're
made
away
sure
from
we
home.
had what we needed to have. So he was that that father figure that looked like us, for many of us who didn't grow up with our dads, you know, and he was taking care of us. So our moms at home, miles and miles away, felt comfortable like we're going to be all right because somebody was there looking out for you. So, you know, all of these things happening the way that they do, lined up and set up in such a way, again, they don't happen by accident. Even to you telling your story about, again, working at the place where this guy is helping kids get in school. My experience with you, I don't know if you remember, but you know, back in Chicago, back in the day, they had, you know, Ada McKinley services.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
that's where I went, you know, to, you know, see, you know, at that time that was run by, you know, Silas
Parnell.
Parnell, you know, and
Right.
he was
Silas
getting black
Parnell.
kids in the schools, all HBCUs, wherever,
Right.
you know, and I had an opportunity to meet a gentleman that was new to town and had started working in the office, and, you know, and he took a liking to me and to my mom, and, you know, when he saw what my academics looked like, he said, you know, and I told him I gave him my whole little drama story about Morehouse, and oh, he was like, no, ain't worry about it. I know the school for you. And he tells me about the school, you know, University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. And I'm like, who? What is that? He's like, look, they got a lot of money. They would love your academics, match it. He's like, I know somebody, I'm gonna set it up. And he put me and another guy from Chicago. He put us on a Greyhound bus, sent us down there during spring break, you know, to go see the school. We go down there, stay for the weekend. By the time the weekend was over, we had met all the key people that we needed to meet, and they were
Yeah.
setting up our financial aid and,
Okay.
you know, work and all that. So by the time I decided I was officially going to go there, my mom dropped me off at college with $50 in a new bank account that I started up. I had my financial aid in place. I had a work study job. I was staying in the dorms. All I had to do now was go to school and do do what I need to do academically. But again, these things don't happen by
Right. So
accident, and
many of
it's
us went
all
through
in the
Silas
plan.
Parnell because when I was at the University of Minnesota, there was another guy that went to Brother Rice,
Uh
but he
huh.
went through Silas Parnell. We ended up there. I didn't know he was going to transfer. I transferred because, you know, my whole journey I told you about. And he ended up transferring to South Carolina to HBCU. Was it Bennett or it's a HBCU in South Carolina. And now he's a lawyer.
Wow. Wow.
But we once again Southside kid, and went through the Silas Parnell, Ada
Yeah.
McKinley thing over there. So we do have a lot of definitely parallels.
Yes, absolutely. And again, just we were just blessed to meet key people along the way who didn't owe us anything, had no
Right.
obligation to us one way or the other, but they saw the importance of you know, young black kids, inner city, getting a good education, and they made ways to position us to go to our respective universities and colleges and to have the money that our parents would have not have otherwise been able to come up with, or known
Right.
about the resources that were available to help us. So with that said, I want to take it even another level, because throughout your experiences, much of which you've shared, you've actually taken that experience and catapulted it into giving back to other, you know, young people who are trying to come up with money for school and be able to get an education that they may not have otherwise been able to do. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like what inspired you to want to go that direction, and how, what has that journey been like in actually helping other kids be able to come up, including your own, to come up with the money that they needed to come up with? Not, and we're not talking about, I want my audience to be clear, we're not just talking about just quote unquote financial aid, because a whole bunch of us got financial aid that got to be paid back. We're talking about actual scholarship money that, you know, that you're being able to get access to, where you're able to actually walk up out of these universities and colleges loan free. What, kind of walk us through what that experience has been like, and that journey for you, and how you got connected with that, and what kind of inspired you to want to go that route?
Well, as I was telling you earlier, after we were, my son got christened and we were at the house celebrating, and my bestie from high school asked me what did I want for my son or what was my goal. And I said it was for him to graduate from college with no student loans. And everybody laughed, like, okay, good luck with that. So, and, my husband and I were still Basically, we were newlyweds. I think I had my son actually 10 days before our first anniversary.
Hmm.
So he wanted the children to go to um, private school. So we did the daycare thing because we were still trying to run the business. But I did have my son home for quite some time before. Maybe he was like a year and a half, almost 2 years old. I was pregnant with my daughter before I sent him to a preschool or to a daycare. And um, we were kind of struggling at the time. And I don't know if you remember, they had some help in Illinois for people who were working, but they didn't have enough to take care of the kids. They would give you the daycare like a stipend, and then you would
Mm-hmm.
pay part, and they would pay part.
Yep.
And then from there, he was like, I want them to go to Catholic school. He went to all Catholic grammar school. And so like then he went to Catholic high school, St. Willibrod, until like
Oh.
his sophomore year. And then he transferred to a public school.
Okay.
So I was like, I don't know. You think we can afford this? You know, we're just trying to get these businesses off the ground. And so we started off in Catholic school. And we were at one school and we were kind of having financial difficulties, but both my kids were performing really at a high academic level. And my son was exceptionally good. He was like tutoring eighth graders in math in like the fourth grade. He's just really advanced. And we decided to transfer them to another school, and that principal offered us scholarship money. He was like, "Oh, we like kids like this." We didn't even know it existed. That Big Shoulders and some other things that he did, he was able to raise a lot of money for the school. So then that offset my children's tuition. I had them in a lot of programs, and one time a woman came to church. I missed it, but my husband was there, and she worked for Northwestern, and they had a Center for Talent Development. And she was talking about them looking for students, including minority students. And they, in grammar school, they were going to take them and kind of give them different classes. So, but they had to have a certain kind of standardized test score, and then they wanted them to take the ACT.
Mm-hmm.
So in the seventh grade, I had my son go take the ACT at Mount Carmel. So he was the smallest thing in there. And people were like, well, you have your son taking the ACT. And, you know, I had them in a lot of activities. We didn't do a lot of television. They got a little bit on the weekends just because we kind of kept them busy with, you know, various activities. And he took it, and my daughter had to take a different standardized test, but she had tested really well in her reading on her reading score, and that they actually had her to retest because, you know, it's unbelievable that a
Right.
black kid could get like a
Could read like that.
99%. Like
Right.
what? So then we were able to get them into Northwestern. So in grammar school, my kids were taking classes on Saturdays
At
in
Northwestern.
debate and
I had to wait to go to graduate school to go to Northwestern. Your kids taking classes at Northwestern when they still kids.
right when they were in grammar school.
Okay.
And from that really kind of set them apart and got them used to like test taking and just meeting other kids because it's a whole program that they have there. But those other kids had to pay. We didn't have to pay.
Mm.
And there weren't that many African Americans. And there definitely weren't that many African American boys. So a lot of other people were always curious as to how do we find out about the program and what, you know, because it was a few girls, it was a few African American girls, but not a lot, and hardly any of our, you know, young boys doing that. And then, you know, in Chicago, there are several scholarships that help you if you want to go to a private or Catholic high school. So because they had done that, that led me into applying for scholarships for my son first, because my children are one grade level apart. And my, my husband wanted him to go to Fenwick. And I'm like, that's so far. Who's going to drive all the way to Oak Park every day? So you have to be dedicated. You have to be willing to give up some things and make adjustments, because we did make some sacrifices. Like we only had one car and some other things. He did work during a certain time. I worked at a certain time because I took the kids to school and picked them up. And then we still had activities, track and, just different activities. And so my son was able to be a recipient of Daniel Murphy scholarship, the HFS scholarship. He got offered the Link Unlimited scholarship, but you couldn't take Link Unlimited and Daniel Murphy at the same time.
Mm.
So Link Unlimited is specifically geared to African Americans. Daniel Murphy is everybody, and HFS is everybody. And it's so weird. He got the Daniel Murphy, and then we got a letter from Link, and the principal had given me the information about HFS, but I got it late, and I was like, should we apply? Because he got these two offers, and I don't want to, like be greedy.
Right.
You think I'm like, I don't want to be greedy. And so my husband and I decided on the last day, we actually took it to the P.O. box on the very last day. And then they called him back for an interview. All these different scholarships have interviews and stuff like that. But because they had already taken those classes at Northwestern, and then by them always going to small schools, they normally, at MASH, how you have to speak or say a prayer or do something. They were kind of used to talking to people. And he was offered all three, and we end up taking Daniel Murphy and HFS. And Fenwick offered him a very excellent financial aid package as well. So it was nothing to drive under those circumstances. With those scholarships, they expect you to pay something, and we did, because you have to, like, as you say, these schools, I had to pay like $1,000 deposit to hold a spot. And when I went to the introduction thing, and all the parents were sitting in the classroom, and it was standing room only, and one of the parents asked what I was thinking. They were like, well, we know it takes $1,000 to hold a spot. Now, this is high school. It's not college. High school.
Right.
$1,000. And she was like, so can we like make payments as long as we meet the deadline, or what? The lady was like, no, it's $1,000. Like, you got to make a decision by this time, and you need to have $1,000 when you make the decision, because we have a waiting list. So they didn't have, they didn't have to wait for you to come up with the money. So I was like, oh Lord, we did all this. How are we going to get this money? But we were able to come up with that. And, some of the other parents was like, man, you guys gonna really put that much up? And I'm not sending my kids no more Catholic school, and just so on. But I was like, well, I think that this is a good school. I think it'll prepare them. My main concern was that was going to be the first time that they were in a majority white school, because they had just been in the South Side. Even though it was Catholic school, it was pretty much all black. So I was kind of concerned about that adjustment. But, when you go to college and when you get out in life, sometimes you have to navigate other cultures and other people. So we got him in, and that worked out really well. They were very accommodating. He was the first class where they started using the iPads. Or the Apple computers. Well, I forgot, it was the Apple computers or something. Oh, no, it was iPad. So they still had books, but they were integrating. They were starting to get rid of books.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, the next year, she, I was like, oh man, now we're gonna have two back to back, in school. So we applied to all the scholarships. So she ended up being a Link Unlimited scholar and an HFS scholar. And another scholarship was offered to her as well, but she couldn't have that in Link Unlimited, and she wanted to be in Link Unlimited. So we had two children in Catholic school wearing uniforms, with books, and iPads, and we were driving from the south side. I live on the far south side. My exit is 87th Street.
Right.
And so I had to go all the whole damn Rhine, the loop, the circle, then a good portion of the Eisenhower just to
get to school.
I'm sorry, people, but those from Chicago,
yeah, I mean
the Chicagoland area know exactly what I'm talking about. That's a nice hike.
Yeah, and this is what you're talking about, like when you talk about these sacrifices. You heard me say earlier about freshman year at St. Ignatius, 3 buses and a train. Those are the type of changes that we were going through, trying to go to a good school. Our parents were trying to send us to good schools, and we unfortunately, because of the dynamics, and I've had this conversation before, a lot of times our predominantly, black neighborhoods, even if they're black neighborhoods that have, high middle class income earners or anything like that, we don't oftentimes have access to schools like that we can walk up the street to and that kind of thing. We're having to go clear across town, and that poses challenges. Even if you got the financial means, it's just the inconvenience of it, the time. And a lot of times we miss that. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day that I recently had on an episode. He lived right around the corner from me, and you may remember this. We were talking about how if you think back to the day where 89th and Loomis was, and how you had all of those businesses. That's the last time that we've even experienced where you had a predominant black-owned presence of businesses within walking distance of your predominantly black neighborhood. You had grocery store, barbershop, library, daycare,
butcher shop.
Yeah, butcher shop.
We had a butcher shop. You had
and all every type of business that you could have wanted was literally within walking distance. Bakery. Right. And these were predominantly black-owned businesses, or businesses of color, right within your reach. Now, you tell me today, anywhere in the country, where are you seeing neighborhoods like that where there's a majority of us in that are college graduates, successful career people, whatever, and we have that kind of access in neighborhoods where we look like one another? We oftentimes have to go to
most of those down.
I know.
I was there. I hadn't been over there in years, and somebody said they were having a community back to school picnic that my husband and I donated to for some book bags. And I went over there and I was like, wow.
Couldn't even recognize it. It was just
I was kind of hurt.
Yeah.
Actually. I was like, wow, I used to walk over here all the time.
So
it was a sight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So went all the way for basically 6 years because my son had to do some stuff at the school before school started in the fall. And then since my daughter went, after he graduated, I still had another year with her doing it. They made a good time. My daughter did volleyball, and then she was on the track all 4 years. They put her on varsity freshman year, so she did that. And then she was on the swim team. And then my son, he did the swim team, and then he was in the business club and debate team. He ended up helping them get placed. He was actually placed a couple of times in the country. They went out of town to Harvard every year and to just wherever the Catholic debate nationals were for the high schools. So he did an excellent job in debate.
Awesome.
And so that really helped. The scholarships helped with ACT prep. They took them on college tours, and so they got a feel for what kind of university. They want to go to a large or a small or a medium, and they talk to them about those kind of things. So it was very, very helpful. So once I kind of got the feel for it, with Link Unlimited, I was a parent ambassador for a while. I would, like pass out the flyers. I would talk to people about having their children apply to Link Unlimited. And I ended up doing radio a couple of times about scholarships and had people calling me. It was kind of weird for people to call me. But my advice to anybody is you have to start in grammar school. You have to. You can't wait until they're in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Because the scholarships that were looking at my children, one scholarship, he didn't get it, but he was a finalist. He was like in the last 250 in the country. It's called a Jack Kent Cooke scholarship. And if you get it, but you have to apply like in the 7th grade.
Wow.
And if you get it, they'll take you all the way through at least undergrad. But then they have some other things for people that want to go to grad school, art, and some other avenues. So you can't just say, oh, I'm just going to let them be kids. I got told all the time, oh, you're going to burn your kids out and they're going to hate school and don't do this and don't do that. But I just used the resources that were around me to help me, along with the things that I thought to do. Like I took all my 2 children and I had niece and nephew at the same Catholic school. And I went into the library and I said, I'm here to get library cards. And my daughter was the youngest one. And the lady looked at me and she was like, these kids are little. They have to be able to sign their names. I was like, who in here can sign their name? They was like, me. And she was like, well, let's see. And everybody signed their name and they got library cards. And so because I was the one that had the business, I would pick up the children and take them to the library. And then my, niece and nephew, my relatives would come and get the children. I would have them over and we sit down and do homework. I'm like, okay, I give them a little snack. I'm like, okay, time to do the homework. So I kind of gave them like a little structure,
right,
to do things. And then when they got a little bit older, I took them swimming. So they all were on the swim team at a young age. So they had a nice discipline on learning how to swim and meeting other kids and stuff like that. But a lot of people felt like I was doing too much. But to this day, my niece and nephew, they remember. They were like, oh, I remember you and Uncle Andre. And they were like, come on, it's time to do this math. But everybody's a college graduate.
And they're college graduates, and like I said, and
my daughter's the youngest, so she's finishing up her senior year.
And you were sharing earlier, they're not only college graduates or about to be, but they're doing it with little to no debt coming out the door to have to worry about.
Yeah, my niece, she was a Posse scholar, and she went to Middlebury, and so she doesn't have debt, not no any monumental debt. My son is a graduate of the University of Miami. He has no debt. And my daughter will be graduating from St. Louis University, and she will have no debt.
And all this is attributed to scholarships.
It was some financial aid in there, but scholarships, yeah. Because it's like once you kind of get in it with the schooling, they all were able to go to high schools that people wanted to recruit from. Mm-hmm. They all were able to do well on the ACTs and the SATs. And so then they were able to get all kind of, offers and scholarships and have options.
Gotcha. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm just kind of playing this out because it really is, you've taken some old school values and you've combined that with today's resources and technologies, if you will, to set up a plan for kids, for your kids and for other kids, to be able to, like you said, get good educations and to be able to do so, again, walking out the door with little to no debt. And I admire that you speak about things like the structure. You speak about, I got to start early if I want to take, because it's almost like you think about, usually when we start talking about that early positioning, if you will, that's usually the conversation that's in today's times is associated with sports. They say if you want your kid, if they're in basketball, if they're in football or whatever sports, if you don't get them up and rolling into these like AAU camps and stuff like that when they're in elementary school, you can forget about, unless they're just some phenomenal, super exceptional person, the chances of them being able to get into these spaces and on these teams like they need to and get recognized is their opportunity is past if they don't start early. And I think sometimes, and nothing, that's no knock against anybody who has kids in sports and all of that, but we have to also be equally as diligent in the education of our kids to prepare them, especially for the world that they're facing in today. And I just love the fact that you took, that opportunity, you and your husband, you didn't allow the distractions and the noise from the background of folks trying to tell you, oh, you're doing too much. You're doing, you're taking away all their fun, because we know how these kids are today. They spend so much time, on their phones and on their, on their other electronic devices, and they just are not getting that broad experience and that understanding, life skills, academic skills to be ready to be functioning adults. There's a lot of young kids that we're worried about. Like, how are they going to make it? Because everything has been catered to them. They've been, coddled. They've been babied. And we justify it in the beginning by saying, I just want them to have a better life than we had. I want them to have the things that we didn't get to. Nothing wrong with that. But some of what we had, some of what we experienced wasn't so bad. And they need some of that too.
I think sometimes people think about certain things and think it was so bad. We used to have to get up in the morning on Saturday and clean up and go to the grocery store and all that by 12 just in case. Because remember, everybody had phones and everybody had cars. So if somebody came by, one of your relatives might say, oh, let's go over there and Mary Jo and visit her and Joseph, just anything to come over. So our house had to be clean.
It had to be clean.
Noon.
You're right.
On Saturday.
It's so funny you talk about that
before noon on Saturday. And we did so much stuff. I just recently started sleeping past 6:30. I mean, literally. And yeah, you know what? You know how we talked about being young and getting bullied. Sometimes I felt a little bullied by other adults. Mm-hmm. Like I had my son, we let him play basketball. He was not, our other two children were naturally more athletic. Mm-hmm. He had to put a little more work in, but still, I wanted them to know how to go out and have fun and not just sit in the house, go get some exercise, meet people. And one time we came in and my son had on these gym shoes. And then we sat down and it was time to go practice. And he went out there. And the lady was like, why is he running out there in the same shoes that he was on the street in? And I was like, because he got one pair of shoes. And she was like, what? What kind of parent are you?
The guy is not trying to feel like I got to buy 50 pairs of shoes. Yeah.
Because I'm like, what? And she was like, he's supposed to have this a second pair of shoes, and I don't. And so that automatically threw me out of they weren't welcoming me at all because I wasn't in the coach was nice and he gave them time to play, whatever, but the parents were not so kind in that regard.
Because we get caught up with the status, what's the latest thing that you got on, or how much of it did you have? We want to have the bragging rights of all of that kind of stuff. And again, nothing wrong with wanting to get your kids nice stuff or whatever, but you also want to teach them the value of money, and that you're just not automatically just entitled to just have whatever you want just because you want it, and and just making smart decisions about how to utilize resources, again, whether it's financial, whether it's clothing, whether it's whatever, and I can clearly see from talking to you, you've gone out of your way. You and your husband have gone out of your way to kind of drive that messaging home to them
for a long time. And people like, I only got one car. I wouldn't have no one car. But we just made it. That was the decision. But we made it together. And it wasn't one person harboring over there like,
Right.
I'm ready to get this other car. And they over here paying tuition. It, so, the value system has to be similar for it to work. And our family was real supportive of it. And my mother-in-law was definitely pro-education. My mother too, as you know, she's an educator.
Right. Right.
I come from a family of educators. Actually, I made it a point not to be one because we have so many teachers in our family. But it's just interesting though when you people talk about peer pressure. You don't know, all people think about like clothes or material things.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you don't fit the social norms of not knowing what the latest TV show is, or your kids having video games. Like my son didn't get a video game until maybe he was like 6th, 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have cell phones until they went to high school. But now to this day, my kids very rarely watch TV. My son will play video games, but he won't play them more than like an hour or two. Like he doesn't have a attention span to be in there all day, just sitting down playing video games. And we also try to make sure we expose them to positive people, faith-based people, Christian people, as best we could, especially Christian Black men. So some of our activities we had a lot of God-fearing Black men in them. For my son and my daughter can see not just their father like it's an aberration,
right?
But there are a lot of strong, dedicated Christian Black men that are out here in the community.
Love that.
So that was very, very important to us as well.
That is awesome. I'm thoroughly enjoying your story here with the journey of education and just the child rearing and just even the giving back to other kids, just trying to share with people, just kind of give them the knowledge.
Yeah, I've had 3 people call me this year already asking me about a couple of those scholarships and what should they do. And so I gave them the best advice that I could give them because, I'm kind of out of the loop now. Mm-hmm. But I'm always willing.
You're that example, though. I mean, if nothing more, you're that visual example that this can work, and it's not a mindset that you got to be filthy rich in order for it to work, or that you have to be, super well connected. It just requires, as you said, it requires a commitment. It requires some sacrifices along the way. It requires, of course, faith, and trusting God to, to navigate you through that. I mean, you're hitting all of the important points of it all. And I think that's what makes the story so special, because people could really easily say, well, you just got this because your kids are smart. Or you just got this because, y'all must have some money that nobody know about. You just got this because, no, you were very strategic. You were very deliberate. You were very intentional. You thought this thing through, and you made your children a priority. You wanted the best for them in the right areas. And I don't know if you paid attention to the title, and I kind of got this actually from something that you had posted about knowing when. You're making these conscious decisions about knowing when to do this and when to let go of that, when to focus on this and when to not focus on that. This speaks to all that you've talked about. The title hits it on spot on. That's what you've been doing.
Right. You have to be creative. We had our kids in, one time they did get a scholarship to University of Illinois program. And then that program introduced us to like free tennis lessons. So we will go to 7:00 service so our kids could go to do the free tennis on Sundays. Like, so it was like always something. And my daughter, she was like, isn't this summer? Aren't we supposed to be on break? Why are we always in a program where we have to do homework? So we did a couple of times. We did Christian like summer camps where they would do, some education, Bible lessons, and we did a barter sometimes. We would, at the time we had we were doing T-shirts and other advertising specialties, promotional items. But for the camps, you let my kids go to the camp. We'll do the T-shirts and we'll do the little backpacks in the same
Mm-hmm.
color or whatever, and give them a water bottle, and they will go. So you have to be creative. You can ask. The worst they can say is no.
Right.
The best they can say is yes. But for the most part, we kind of like made it. We were very kind of intentional on the things that we did, and like I said, and it's going to take some sacrifice on the parents' part. Sometimes you can't go on that trip. My friends are going on trips, and you want to come and go into reunions and stuff, and I'm like, I can't do it. But now I can. But it was worth the
It was worth the
it
sacrifice.
was worth the sacrifice. And in
Yeah.
some ways, it wasn't really even a sacrifice. It was kind of like my duty. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so much free stuff. Like the Northwestern thing was free for us because they tested well. But Chicago Public Library, every year they have a thing where the kids read. You read so many books, and then they pay high school students, or either the librarians will they come in and they do a little book report. So if they are in picture books, then they can draw a picture and tell the person what um, what it was about. But as they get older, they're supposed to write a couple of sentences and tell. So I had them in that for years in the summertime.
That's awesome.
So
That
we want to read. We want to really impress these things upon them, because the world is always coming in
mm-hmm.
with something new, something different. Oh, you don't understand. Oh, times are different. But those things will help them. And then it gives them a foundation of their morality and what they decide is right and wrong. And then how do you stand up for what you believe?
Totally agree. I love that. I totally agree with you on that. Tell me this, Andrea. If
Yes.
when you find yourself faced with challenging situations, whether it's something really major like how I'm gonna, handle this, this big obstacle in my way, or if it's just something really minor, I'm just curious to know, what do you like to do? What sort of works for you that kind of helps you process dealing with difficult times, so that you can keep a level head while at the same time facing head on whatever it is that's before you that you need to address without getting sidetracked, without getting, overwhelmed in the moment of dealing with that adversity moment. What is your routine or regiment that you like to do?
Well, when I first started off, when I got married, I worried. That's what I did. I worried. Oh no, oh no. And then, they say, if you praying, why worry? And if you worrying, why you praying? Right. So you start praying. And then we went to mass at one of the schools one day, and the pastor was talking about taking time for yourself to read a Bible passage. He was like, I know you guys read, but like make it like a daily habit, even if
Mm-hmm.
you have to lock yourself in the bathroom, because it was a grammar school. So, your kids are always pulling at you and
Right.
when they're young. And so um, I started being more consistent with just a daily word, like Our Daily Bread. Remember those little books we used to get?
Mm-hmm.
Our Daily Bread in the upper room.
Yeah. All of that.
All of that. I worked out. So I would take the kids to school and then I would work out, or I would walk around the park. Just kind of depending on what was going on, and so how the schedule was going at the time. But some kind of physical exercise, and then the spiritual exercise and discipline of just starting off with praying or reading a passage and reflecting on it, or doing and meditating a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes I just lose my cool and then get it back together. Uh, I like to do like word puzzles or like the Sudoku and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if I'm really stressed, I won't even think of anything. I'll just focus on solving that little problem, those little problems. and then kind of revisit it later and kind of see what's gonna happen. But of course, as you get older, you find out that it's gonna work out, even if it doesn't work out the way you want, and you have to go through some tough times or embarrassing times. The long run is working out. It doesn't
Right.
feel like it all the time, but it is working out to your benefit. It might be a lesson you have to learn, or two or three.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
And at the time, it's uncomfortable. You might get embarrassed, or you just don't want anybody to know. You withdraw. People handle those things differently. But if life lasts and death pass, you'll be okay. So once
Hmm.
I kind of got to that point, even if I'm starting to worry, then I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Well, like what besides death? Okay, I'm not. This is not a. This is not what happened. Is not the death penalty. So
Right.
now, what else? What can happen?
And that's a good way to look at it. There's a few takeaways from what you're saying. I like the fact that you're one, and it kind of again goes back to what you've been talking about this whole time. One, I'm not waiting until the last minute to try to focus on dealing with challenging or stressful moments. There are things that you have incorporated as being a lifestyle process that you do, so that when those moments do hit, you're already armored up, if you will. You're already prayed up. You're already covered, if you will, to be able to handle the hit. Then I love the fact that that you acknowledged that sometimes I just had to let it out, and that's you saying to yourself as well as to others. And I want others to get this. You're still a human being,
Right.
so you have a right to, if you got to scream, you got to cry, you can get that out. You can have you entitled to that human emotion. It's just you don't want to stay stuck there.
Right.
Don't just stay stuck there, but it's okay to have that moment.
Yeah.
And then I like the fact that sometimes the approach is just, you know what? Let me take a step back from it for a moment and just do something that I enjoy that'll just soothe me. So I'm gonna get into my puzzle or my Sudoku or whatever, or take a walk. Sometimes you just have to take a step back, catch your breath, come back in it with a clear head, so that way you can make a focused, you know, not an overly emotional decision. I'm clear minded, clear head, clear focus. Now I can deal with this, and of course, with you having that relationship with God, I can now hear His guidance and direction on how I should
Right.
proceed with this, versus me all panicked and worrying and freaking out. Because, as you said, why I'm gonna pray for if I'm worrying, and if
Yeah, I
I've
had to
already
get
prayed,
that
then
one.
why I'm worrying about it? you
Right.
know.
I had to get that one out. That was one because when you grow up in the church or grow up in, your challenges are limited. But as
Hmm.
the more you move into adulthood, you're going to face different challenges. And
Right.
then those are kind of like your tests of faith. And you have to work through it. And sometimes you pass and sometimes you don't. God don't fail you.
That part.
Right. God not, He's just waiting for us to, get with it. God doesn't fail you. I will say that for me, I have always had a lot of helpful older people around. Like I used to go to the Y after I would drop off my kids at school, and it was a lot of older women in the locker room, and I got a lot of wisdom, and they shared a lot of wisdom, and they were very kind. So I've been blessed to get a lot of wisdom from older people, throughout my life, and I've been blessed to be able to hear it and receive it
Hmm.
and act on it, because those are all different
They are.
things. Even because sometimes you don't want to hear it, and then when you hear it, you're like, I ain't doing that. Right? They tripping.
Right.
But when you can really honestly have people who are giving you sound information and sound advice without malice or concern one way or the other, they just let you know what it is. If you're open to taking it, you will be better served.
I
And then
totally agree.
sometimes you have to, when the people say, chew the meat and spit out the bones. Sometimes people tell you stuff that's crazy, but it's like a nugget or two in there. But
Mm-hmm.
everything else is crazy. So you still got to be able to filter.
Right. That's where your discernment comes in. Like, okay, how do I take what, how do I glean out, draw from this what I need and
Right.
that rest. Let me just lead out on, lead out on
Right.
over here. So
Right. If it don't apply to you, don't worry about it. But if it applies, then be okay with you not perfect all the time and you don't have all the answers. And every time somebody tells you something, it's not a personal affront or attack.
mm-hmm.
So if you can do that, that's really gonna it helped me. I'm not gonna say it helped anybody else. Helps me. So I know that you don't have a good support system.
That's wonderful, and because that community piece is important too. Just having people around you. It doesn't have to even be a large circle; just the right
No.
circle, the right circle of people that you can be vulnerable, you can be transparent in front of. They'll keep it real with you. They won't tell you what you need to, that you want to hear. That they'll tell you what you need to hear, and even if it comes with a little sting to it, they're doing it in love, not to harm, not to hurt, not to knock you down, but
Right.
to build you up and encourage you. So all of those things that you shared are very necessary, and I love your process that you use that works for you. And I think there are others who could draw from that if they don't currently have their own process to work off of. This is definitely a great example to tap into that you've shared. So Andrea, if you had a chance to talk to the younger version of Andrea, think about all of the things that you've been through, experience as you reflect over your life and what's come your way. What would be your, if you could sum it up in a few words, what would be those words of encouragement to that young woman up and coming, just trying to figure life out and and her identity, what moves to make and how to go about just navigating all the challenges that come along with life, the journey. What would be those words of wisdom or encouragement that you would have to offer?
I would have the offer to be patient with yourself, be patient with life, don't rush. Um, don't carry a lot of baggage because I hear people talk all the time about things that happen in grammar school and high school. And you can't let a bunch of 11-year-olds or 15-year-olds control your adult life.
Mm,
They were kids too. And I mean, I got teased, but then I started teasing people back. So I'm sure I know I said some things to people that I would never say today, but I was a kid. So give yourself grace, but give other people grace, and just kind of move on. What you can always ask yourself, what did I learn from that? So I would tell young people to pay attention and keep going, and always try to see what lesson you can get out of your experiences, and how can this make you better, or what do you need to do not to have that happen again. And um, you have to learn how to be comfortable with your limits and your boundaries and your standards, because the worst, probably I could say, the worst thing is to have a set of standards, make exceptions, and then you get that disappointment or that harm and that hurt feelings when you knew in your heart, you already got to trust yourself.
mm-hmm.
If it doesn't feel right for you, it's okay. Laugh it off, or take the tease and whatever. It's not for everybody, and what you're doing is not for everybody. So that's what I would tell young people: just be patient, be kind, and stand firm for what you believe.
That's wonderful. Wonderful advice. I can't question any bit, the bit that you said. I mean, anybody, whether you're talking about young people or just young adults that are trying to, again, navigate life, that was a great
Oh, one
words of
last thing.
wisdom.
It's okay. It's okay to make a mistake or think you want to do something and then change your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's okay.
Changing your mind is okay. Or discovering that what you thought was it that you studied for all your life and you're like it was not okay. It's just to suffer when
Mm-hmm.
you can do something about it.
Love that. Love that. So, Andrea, before I let you go, it's been definitely a pleasure talking with you and just the
Thanks.
journey, the story, the
Catching up.
memories, all of the catching up. I mean, this has been some good stuff. I mean, isn't it? It's just sort of been a reunion of sorts, but at the same time, you dropped some very powerful nuggets today, and I know people are going to be blessed by what you've shared in your journey and in your story. I know I've been along the way in hearing you out and just taking it all in. So, but before we let you go, I do want to, of course, take an opportunity to celebrate you, to love on you, to affirm you, to acknowledge you. So if you have any upcoming projects, anything exciting that's happened, milestones, anything that we can celebrate or acknowledge at this time, please share with us what's going on that we need to know about or that you about to get into or whatever that we need to be aware of. And again, we can lift you up in prayer about that and celebrate you and all of that. So anything that you'd like to share with us before we let you go?
Well, my biggest milestone is I will be coming up in the spring on my 25th wedding anniversary.
Beautiful, beautiful.
That's a big milestone to me. I know it might not be a big milestone to a lot of people, but
No,
I
it
think
is.
it's it's a blessing. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to have a partner and to build a life and then to raise children together and to see them grow and develop. Because when I first got married, I was like, oh, what's going on? Because I had been single and, living overseas, just different things. So
Right.
that's definitely a milestone for me. Um, I've been in business now since 2012 with my own business. Not my husband's business, my own business. And so it was October 2012. So this is my 11th year.
11th year. Yeah. That's
So that's
awesome.
also a great milestone
So we
to
got
be able
11
to be
years
in
in
business.
entrepreneurship. We got coming up on 25 years of
Mm,
marriage. I mean, that's
right.
key.
And coming up on getting this last child out of college.
Right, right. Hey, last kids coming up out of college, and again, we've been talking about this debt free
Yeah, debt
as far as the
free.
student loans goes,
No,
and
right. No student loans.
so that's all of those things are awesome, beautiful milestones, and I'm so happy for you and your family, and that's just great. That's just I just love to hear that and to be able to celebrate it. And because again, seeing the longevity in marriages, seeing the longevity in entrepreneurship, seeing the longevity in our kids growing up and being successful young men and young women ready to take on the world and live out their calling and their purpose in life. You've got a chance to experience all of that, and
It's been a
that's
blessing.
it's
It's
been a
been a
blessing.
blessing. Who knew? I didn't. I just never knew.
So yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, but God knew. God
Right.
knew, and
God knew.
all of the
Right.
he
God
knew
knew.
all along, and all of the experiences, all of the
All
bumps
those right.
along the
All those
way, all
challenges.
the challenges, all of the bus rides with your letter in your hand, all of that, played its role to get you to this point in time, and I'm convinced and confident that he's still not done with you yet. You're about to enter
Yeah.
into a new season, a new phase, and who
I
knows
hope
what
so.
God
I
is going
had
to
some
open up
things
with
I
that.
was thinking about doing, so I'm hoping to. I'll come back and share it with you
Well,
once I.
absolutely, and whatever that is, well, first of all, you're always welcome to come back, and secondly, whatever that is, we're just already going to speak into existence that whatever God is already placing on your heart, that he's manifesting the next level to your vision, the next level to your purpose and calling, that is going to work itself out. And you just continue to do what you've been doing, which is leaning into him and trusting in him and relying on him to be your guide, your eyes, your ears to get you to where you need to be, understanding that he's in control and he's never going to put something on your heart or direct you in the wrong path or anything like that. He never fails. Like last time I checked, his record is undefeated. So,
he's undefeated. It's us, right?
Yeah, it's us.
It's
we
us.
we the ones, but he's undefeated. So
right, God is undefeated. I love the Lord. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've enjoyed talking to you. I just was so nervous, but this has been a blast.
Absolutely, it's been a blast. And like I said, I'm looking at you, and I'm just like, I see your mom all over your face. You look.
Everybody says that. They're like, "Oh, you look so much."
I'm like looking at you. I'm like, I'm looking at Andrea. I'm looking at her mom. I'm like, that's your mom. Just saying. And just even that, because was it this year or last year that you celebrated your mom's 80th birthday?
It was last September. And would you believe I actually found some people that went to grammar school with her?
Wow.
And they came and we surprised her, and she loved it.
I know she did. And I know between how you are and I know how your sister Tracy is, I know you all put it together just the way it needed to be to make sure mom had
I have to give credit to my husband. He added a lot to just the whole visual and where the venue and everything. But he has a good eye. So it was great. You didn't see her viral video? She went viral.
Oh, okay.
We got to get you that.
I'm gonna have to check that then.
The decorator, the event planner, she did a little video of when she walked in.
Okay.
Because we had to walk in on the silver carpet, so she walked in and she put it to some music, and she texted me and called me. She was like, "Your mom went viral. She my first viral video."
That is awesome. I love that.
So we had a lot of relatives from all over the country. So it was really kind of like a mini family reunion, which was also good because sometimes it's hard for everybody to get together, but it was very just great. And so we were able to get a couple of really good pictures. We had a photographer there, so we have a picture with like all the generations.
That's cool.
Together. So that's always those moments. You can't beat that.
Yeah, you can't beat that. And again, it's just a blessing that your mom is still around, in her right mind and all of that good stuff, and just being able to experience your successes and her grandchildren and just that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Your mom is a wonderful woman. I've always had fond memories of her, and she's always been very sweet. Anytime I've encountered her over the years, from childhood up to now. So so definitely pass on my hellos to her, and I'm just thankful that the impact that she's had on your life and on your sister's life, and just you all have turned out to be phenomenal and again doing great stuff, and your kids are destined to do great stuff as well. So it's been an awesome time, and for those of you who have tuned in, I appreciate you doing so. And if you've enjoyed the content and what we've talked about today, enjoyed the show format, please subscribe, please share, please like, please comment, because here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is what it's all about. Being transparent, sharing our journey, sharing our stories with the hopes of empowering and encouraging and uplifting and inspiring others. Just being raw, being real, just laying it all out there. But also, most importantly, reminding you that anything is possible with God. You have that relationship, you lean into him, you trust in him, you let him be the head of your life. I promise you it'll be the best decision that you ever make in your life. You will not go wrong. We're not telling you something that we heard. We're telling you something that we know. If the stories that you heard today that we shared is not proof of that, I don't know what to tell you. But in case you need more, there are more episodes that can give you that as well. So,
I got some stories. and we didn't even have enough time to get
we didn't even have enough time to get all the stories in.
Right.
So, we thank you though for tuning in, and remember, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and where your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, God bless. Keep fighting the good fight. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. Lean into God. Trust him. Let him be the head of your life. And I promise you, You won't go wrong. You won't be led astray because he loves you unconditionally and he wants nothing but the best for you. So with that said, you take care of yourselves and I'll see you next time.